All right, guys, massive week. This week, week 3 is going to separate the men from the boys. Derrick Henry, he's got to step up. Dalvin Cook, for most of you guys, I don't have him. He's got to step up. The wide receivers that busted last week, Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, have to step up. A lot of players have to step up this week, guys. We're talking NFL Week 3 starts and sits. I'm going to give you guys the optimal plays at each position, the guys that have tough matchups, starts and sits at each position, laid out for you in easy form so you can watch and make executive decisions. Now, when you are starting and sitting, make sure you start the most consistent player. So if you got an option and you're deciding between two players, pick the most consistent, the one that's got the most snap counts, the one that's on the field more. I'm going to help you guys here in this episode. And if you're torn between two, at the end of the day, you got to make an executive decision and make that decision. And this episode is going to help you. So starts and sits at each position, guys, right here, right now to help you guys for week 3. And a lot of you guys are 1-1, 0-2, whatever it may be. This is the week. You gotta pull out a win. So this is a very important episode, all right? So starts and sits NFL Week 3. Now, we're going to play a fun game before we start into this, guys. Let's dive into it. We're going to play more or less real quick, and it's going to be compliments of prizepicks.com. Go create an account, use code DFSLion. They'll double your first deposit up to $100. So here's the game, guys, real quick. So I'm going to pull it up here. Breece Hall. This looks like an easy one for me. In the comments below, let me know 27.5 over or under, more or less than 27.5 rushing yards. This one looks like an easy for me. I know the answer to you. I think it's going to be over. Drop a comment. Let me know. He finally emerged last week and starts and sits this week. I'm going to answer that. Yes, I think you should start Breece Hall. Have the receiving touchdown. He's going to get integrated more. And 27.5 does not seem like much for a second round pick who finally got into the groove last week. Breece Hall. And again, this is how you play. This is how easy it is to play. PrizePicks.com, DFS line. Go create an account. One more question here. Actually, let's do two more here. Derrick Henry, 87.5 over under. It may seem like the under here. You may want to go less, but I think he bounces back this week. It's a must make or break week for Derrick Henry in an easier matchup. And I'm going to go here. I'm not going to tell you all the answers here, but for this one, I think I'm going to go over. So, and again, you put 2 to 5 of these together, and you have a chance to, really, really win on this, okay? And one more, Joe Mixon, easy matchup, 72.5 over at the Jets, over under. All right, guys, that's it. You just put 2 to 5 together, and away you go. So the website you want to go to is prizepicks.com. Use code DFSLion. Go create an account. And in the comments below, let me know what you guys think. More or less for Henry, Mixon, or Breece Hall, according to these stats. Love to get it. And also, guys, Thursday Night Football is on tonight. If you want to enhance that game watching experience, head on over, guys, mybookie.ag. Use code FFC. So listen to this. With that code FFC, you put down $250, and they'll double it for you, okay, guys? So if you put $250 down, you'll get $500 to play. MyBookie.ag, use promo code FFC, enhance that game watching experience. Game tonight, Steelers versus Cleveland. And of course, you can use this for UFC. You can use it for any type of sports that you watch, including Sunday's games and Monday's games. And MyBookie.ag is the site I use code FFC. Go do that now. All right, let's dive into the quarterbacks here. If you're new to the channel, make sure you guys click subscribe, thumbs up. Let's get into it. Starting with the quarterback position, the optimal plays at each position. Let's go through it. Stafford coming off a 21-point week last week. Great matchup. Mac Jones, great matchup. Kirk Cousins, great matchup. Josh Allen, great matchup. You don't want to sit Josh Allen, man. You definitely don't. The guy's been absolutely tearing it up. And obviously, if you got your starters, your ace quarterbacks, you don't want to sit them. At the time of this recording, I haven't pulled it up here. I'm going to just double check here the latest news. I'm recording this here on Thursday morning. You're going to want to check Justin Herbert's, status, right? Because the thing is, if he's playing for sure, right? It's those ribs. If he's playing for sure, you definitely want to start him. If he's in, he's probably not going to be limited. It's not going to be like a running back situation. Last I heard, he was limited in practice Wednesday, so he's considered a day-to-day at this point, at this time of recording. But if he's playing, you definitely want to start Justin Herbert, okay? But optimal matchups, again, Kyler Murray coming off a big week. Ryan Tannehill coming off a very bad week. But Ryan and both Ryan Tannehill, the two Ryans, right? First and last name, both have good matchups. Tannehill versus Vegas, Matt Ryan versus KC. Good matchups this week, guys, okay? So do you trust them? Maybe as backups in a 2-quarterback league, definitely worth a start. They can only move up from last week. They had a terrible week. Matt Ryan threw like 3 interceptions, okay? Terrible. Geno Smith, Mitch Trubisky, Jalen Hurts, all great matchups. Jared Goff coming off a nice week last week. Good matchup versus Minnesota this week. Pat Mahomes, mid-range matchup. You still got to start him. Justin Herbert, like I said, you got to start him if he plays. Mid-range matchup. Trevor Lawrence, mid-range matchup. Had a 19-pointer last week. Definitely worth starting if you got him, okay? Now, typically he's drafted as a backup, but definitely worth starting if you need him in a 2-quarterback league. Guys that have it in tough here. Tua, great week last week. Got it in tough versus Buffalo. Buffalo has been the real deal defensively. Are they going to continue this? Very, very possible. So, Buffalo guys, they could play Tua tough. So if you're starting Tua, be aware. I love Buffalo. I've got him as a defense, been crushing it with them in year long. They've got, if they could set up something to stop the deep pass, they're going to be in good shape. They can neutralize Tua and Tyreek in that offense. So this is a game I'll be watching. Buffalo versus Miami, very interesting, but Tua's got it in tough. Aaron Rodgers coming off a decent week, got it in tough. Russell Wilson coming off some crappy weeks, hasn't really gotten in the groove, got it in tough versus San Fran. Jameis Winston, I don't trust him to start. I know he's banged up, but I still don't trust him to start. He's got it in tough. Carson Wentz coming off 2 amazing weeks. He's kind of maybe met his match here. He's got it in tough versus Philly. Be aware of that. Jimmy Garoppolo, who gets the start potentially here, should be starting. Got it in tough versus Denver. Lamar Jackson, I heard he was banged up, but it's not going to be serious. He was a little sore. Should be good to go versus New England. Joe Flacco coming off a big week and got it in tougher versus Cincy. Davis Mills, Justin Fields coming off crappy weeks. Very hard to trust unless you're desperate. You don't want to start them. They've also got tough matchups. Brady, also 11th hardest versus position. Be aware of him coming off 2 mediocre weeks, including a 10-pointer last week. Playing Green Bay this week, 11th hardest versus position. So, quick recap here. Tua, Rodgers, Wilson, Wentz, Lamar, on paper, have it in tough, but if they're your starters, you got to start them in year long. If you're DFS, you may want to pass on them. Guys that have it in good, Stafford, Mac Jones, Josh Allen, Ryan Tannehill, Matt Ryan and Ryan Tannehill. Kyler Murray, Mitch Trubisky, Geno Smith, Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff, good matchup. So if you're deciding between quarterbacks based on optimal plays, those are your starts and sits based on matchups, because I give you guys how tough their matchup is. Now, again, you got to make that decision. If you're starting quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who's got a tougher matchup, if he's your starter and your backup is Ryan Tannehill, you still want to start Lamar Jackson. So make the right decisions, all right? Let's move on here to the running backs, okay? Running backs, very, very important position, and I'm hoping there's going to be a lot of bounce backs for a lot of players. Josh Jacobs, drafted typically in the 3rd round, easy matchups. Let's go over the easy matchups here. Josh Jacobs, easy matchup, had a 9-pointer last week. Dalvin Cook, who's been absolutely playing like crap. No excuses for Dalvin Cook this week, coming off an 8-point week last week. This week, easy matchup versus Detroit versus the run. Be aware of that. Miles Sanders, who's been safe and lackluster, but consistent, right? 12 points last week, playing Washington. Relatively easy matchup for Miles Sanders. Now, Cam Akers came alive last week, got himself 8 points. Easy matchup versus Arizona. Joe Mixon, who I have on my rosters, had a mediocre last week. Need him to step up this week. 11 points last week, playing the Jets. Joe Mixon is a must-start on all platforms. Great matchup. Antonio Gibson, 12 points last week. And with him, very hard to trust, but he does have an easy matchup, okay? Mark Ingram, we got to take a look at Kamara, his status. I haven't looked at it. Let me just see if there's any news on Kamara here that I can see. But Mark Ingram stepped it up last week. If Kamara still, sidelined, you definitely want to start Mark Ingram. He had himself a good week, and both Kamara and Ingram have good matchups, okay? Dameon Pierce, a lot of people saying, do I start Stidham? Yes, you start Dameon Pierce in a great matchup versus Chicago, and he finally came alive last week. Lovie Smith already singing his praises, saying, I don't know the exact quote, but it's something along the line of, this guy is good. We all got to play like Dameon Pierce. He runs hard. He plays well. He finishes plays strong, and he actually stepped up last week, got the volume that we want. Expected improvement from him and Davis Mills in a loss last week that they shouldn't have lost that game, man. They played hard, but couldn't finish it off. So Dameon Pierce will get the volume. I like him not only in DFS, he's a value, but also in year long. I'm going to be flexing him this week. David Montgomery, 19-point week last week. Start David Montgomery. Start Derrick Henry. Guys, both these guys in a prime position. Henry versus who's Henry playing? Vegas, and Montgomery versus Houston. Henry got arguably one of the easiest matchups versus position at the running back position, coming off 2 mediocre weeks. This is the week Derrick Henry must step up. Now, his attempts are there. I'm not concerned. He was playing Buffalo last week. He's going to step it up this week. This is the week. Now, Moving on here to other easy matchups. A couple more I want to say here. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, great matchups. It was a Chubb week last week. Is Kareem Hunt going to be the guy this week? Very possible. Very up and down. We don't know who the running back one is there. I still think it's Hunt. Chubb had a good week last week. Zeke Elliott, another guy. So it's ironic here because you're looking at this and you're like, Henry and Zeke, two guys that need to step it up, actually have favorable matchups. So Zeke Elliott versus the Giants today. Easy matchup. Easy breezy lemon squeezy versus the Giants. Had an 8-pointer last week. He must step it up. He's getting a lot of ridicule. This is the week for Zeke. If he doesn't step it up, he's not start worthy. If you want to consider starting him, this is the final week. If he doesn't do it, this is it. This is the week that separates the men from the boys. All right. Jonathan Taylor, easier matchup. Had 7 points last week. 12th easiest versus position. He's playing KC. DeAndre Swift, mid-range matchup. James Robinson, mid-range matchup. Let's go for the guys that got it in tough. But again, if they're your running backs, you don't want to sit them. Like Aaron Jones, third hardest versus position. You don't want to sit him coming off a 35-point week. But week 1, notice it was Dylan. Then Aaron Jones week 2 stepped up. Is it going to go back to Dylan? Similar to Hunt, Chubb, Hunt. Right? This is why I kind of stayed away from these committees. It's going to be interesting to see, but they've got the third hardest matchup versus position versus Tampa Bay. You still want to start either Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Both these guys are primed to get some volume, and they're a big focal point of the Green Bay offense based on the offensive match, how they've been playing anyway. Singletary has been playing like absolute garbage. I wouldn't start him, but if you got him and you don't have any other running backs, has a tough matchup, I would definitely sit Devin Singletary this week. And let's keep going here with other tough matchups. I don't trust these guys, any running back here from Miami. Now, Chase Edmonds is slated as the starter, and he is actually playing like garbage. Like I said, a lot of people went 0 RB, went wide receiver early, and drafted Chase Edmonds as their RB1 or even RB2. He's been a disaster, and he's got a tough matchup versus Buffalo. Definitely not starting him. Javonte Williams, who's been safe at best. Good week 1, mediocre 10-point week 2. Playing San Fran, 6th hardest matchup versus position. Be aware of that, okay? Baltimore running backs, don't trust any of them. They've got it in tough versus New England. Kenneth Walker, is he startable? I mean, he only emerged last week. As of right now, he's a bench play. You bench him till he breaks out. But Kenneth Walker, I still hold on to because Rashad Penny sucks. And Kenneth Walker, first week, last week back, maybe he starts getting work this week, although he's a sit this week because he's got a tough matchup versus Atlanta anyway. Austin Eckler, playing like garbage, just not getting it done in the rushing game, is actually in a tough situation here. 10th hardest versus position versus Jacksonville. I don't know. If you got Eckler, I mean, you drafted him in the second round, you got to start him, but I personally don't trust him. Christian McCaffrey, 12th hardest versus position versus New Orleans. Had a 20-point week last week, safe and secure. Najee Harris, I'm starting him, mid-range matchup. He's playing tonight versus Cleveland. Going to be interesting to see how that pans out. Another make-or-break week for a guy who's got to step it up. Another mid-range matchup here. You want to be aware of 2 guys that are big names here. 3 big names. Leonard Fournette, who apologized to the fantasy community for not getting a touchdown last week. I appreciate that, Leonard Fournette. I applaud you for appreciating the community. Although I still didn't draft you. 9 points last week, playing Green Bay, mid-range matchup. The other guys I'm talking about here, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, mid-range matchup, coming off a 16-point week last week, playing Indy, mid-range. Breece Hall, I'm going to go ahead and probably flex him. He did step up last week, 13 points, got a touchdown, playing Cincy this week. Going to be interesting to see how much they integrate him, if he's going to be more of a factor. I believe so. And Najee Harris, like I said, make-or-break week, playing Cleveland tonight. I think he steps it up. So that's running backs for you guys, all right? Again, recap. Oh, yeah, Saquon Barkley. He's also got a relatively tough matchup. You need to be aware of that. Saquon Barkley is a must-start, although, like I said, relatively tough matchup as well. So let's go through this here. Saquon Barkley, by the way, is playing Dallas, all right? 9th hardest versus position on paper, but you got to start him. So again, recap, Singletary, Aaron Jones, Dylan, Chase Edmonds is sit. Javonte Williams got a tough matchup in a committee with Melvin. You may want to flex him still. Should be solid and secure. Denver's got to step it up. Kenneth Walker, Penny, probably want to sit those guys. Saquon Barkley, tougher matchup. You may want to start him still because he's not, him and Eckler, tougher matchups, but you still got to start them, okay? Easier matchups, like I said, Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders, to name a few. Cam Akers, good matchup. He came alive last week, maybe worth starting. Dameon Pierce, I like. David Montgomery, I like. Derrick Henry, I like. And Zeke Elliott, good matchup. And these guys have to step it up. Najee, Henry, guys like that. Najee, Montgomery, Henry have to step it up. Sorry. All right, let's move on here to the wide receiver position. All right. Now, if I haven't reminded you guys, if you haven't done it, manscaped.com. The code you want to use is ShowerLine20. Go treat yourself. Pause this video. Go treat yourself. Get some Boxers 2.0. Try the cologne I've got in my hand here. Manscaped.com. They sponsor this show. Use code SHOWERLINE20. Go treat yourself. Amazing products right now. Go do that, guys. All right. Let's move on to the wide receivers here. Let's keep rolling with this. There's a lot of information here for you guys, so make sure you guys are paying attention here. Now, the optimal starts here. Jacoby Myers, 19-point week last week. Great matchup versus Baltimore. Marquise Brown, do we trust him fully? I mean, it's Greg Dortch that's been stepping up. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. If not, too bad. That's what it sounds like. Dortch is scorching people. 16 points last week, had himself a good week. A.J. Brown caught a couple balls here. Arizona receivers, it's kind of like it's diverse there. You don't know where the ball is going to go. So I don't know if I trust any of them, but they've all got a good matchup. So if you've got a Cardinals receiver, you may want to consider starting them. They are playing the Rams secondary, and they've got a favorable matchup, okay? Like I said, New England as well. Baltimore, we know their secondary is not that good. So Aguilar, if you picked him up off waiver wire this week, you may want to start him or Jacoby Myers, okay? Moving on here, Metcalf, Seattle, they've got a good matchup versus Atlanta. Metcalf and, I was giving you two there. So Lockett, Metcalf, I don't know if I trust them, but Lockett had a good week last week. Good matchup versus Atlanta, and Renfro and Las Vegas receivers got a pretty decent matchup this week as well versus Tennessee. So be aware of that. You may want to consider, your receivers with Vegas, but again, they split it up quite a bit. And we know Adams had a mediocre week last week. Deontay Johnson, who's been a consistent target for Mitch Trubisky, good matchup tonight here versus Cleveland. A.J. Brown coming off a mediocre 12-point week, but they've got an easy matchup versus Washington. So Hurts been doing really well. Quez Watkins, if you picked them up off waiver wire in a deeper league, you may want to start him. Devontae Smith, they all had a good week last week. Who is going to be a target there, a primary target? All good options here. But again, another type of wide receiver committee. And A.J. Brown's the expensive one, third round pick. I stayed away. Interesting to see how he does tonight. Amari Cooper, favorable matchup this week versus Pittsburgh. It's going to be interesting to see how he does. Jefferson coming off a bust week versus Detroit. Good matchup this week. So someone you definitely want to start. Obviously, Keenan Allen's banged up. Check his status. I don't know if I have an update here on Keenan Allen. You definitely want to check his status before. I see that he was limited in practice with the hamstring. So if not, man, Mike Williams, definitely a start there. So Joshua Palmer as well. They do have a favorable matchup. Be aware versus Jacksonville, okay? Pittman, if he's back, I think he's limited in practice. I heard he was back in practice. Pittman is definitely a start this week if he plays, both him and Alec Pierce. Worth a start. Pierce should get going finally this week because we saw last week that Doolin and Campbell and all the other guys just couldn't get it done. They're looking for Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce to step up this week in a must-win situation for Indy versus KC. They may not win the game, but for sure they need to put up some fantasy points. Must win, and they've got a favorable matchup, okay? Other guys that have a favorable matchup you definitely want to be aware of. Stephon Diggs, he's been absolutely amazing. 12th easiest matchup versus position. Jamar Chase, mid-range matchup, but definitely people you want to start. Now, other guys, mid-range matchup. Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins, they've got a mid-range matchup. Brandon Cooks dropping a touchdown pass, I believe it was last week. Playing Chicago, he has to step it up. Other guys here, do you want to start Treylon Burks or Robert Woods? I would say Treylon Burks is a definite solid flex play. He started getting integrated in that offense. Tannehill coming off a bad week, still managed to put up around 7 points here. So Burks should step it up if you're desperate for a wide receiver. I feel a little comfortable, but a little hesitant on starting him too. I'm still not 100% warm on him, but if you're desperate, Treylon Burks has a decent matchup. Tough matchups here. Let's rip through this. Deebo Samuel, I mean, he had a 15-pointer last week. Tough matchup, though, this week. Michael Thomas, decent matchups. I mean, decent points past couple weeks. I mean, if you got these guys, you got to start them, but their matchups aren't favorable. Still, you got to start them. CeeDee Lamb, coming off a mediocre week last week, got a tough matchup versus the Giants secondary this week. Gallup may be back. I haven't read the reporter update on Michael Gallup, but something to monitor there. I heard he may be coming back this week, so something to keep an eye out if you're a Gallup owner, if you had him on your bench. Check the game time decision on him, all right? But maybe worth starting. I know Noah Brown has kind of stepped up, so if you picked him up waiver wire, may get some volume again this week, but they've all got it in tough on paper. Again, I talked about this before, earlier when we were talking about quarterbacks. Tyreek Hill got it in tough. So does Waddle. We're going to see if Buffalo's defense can neutralize Tyreek Hill, something to watch out for. Tampa Bay playing Green Bay, so Lazard. Watson, I heard he was already missing some practice with some hamstring. Watson not being able to be trusted now. I don't trust any of these receivers. I mean, Rodgers is just splitting the ball all around. He's just, just spreading it all around. He's going like, Aaron Jones, he's going Dillon, then he's going Cobb, then he's going Aaron Jones, he's going Dillon, then he's going Aaron Jones, and he's going Lazard. Like, it's a disaster. I mean, you would think that they would use a second-round pick, Watson. The volume's not going his way. I had him as a sleeper stash. It's not turning out very well right now, and they do have a tough matchup, okay? Sutton and Judy, make sure you check out that Judy injury. I heard he was day-to-day. I don't think it's too serious, but Sutton and Judy got it in tough, but definitely want to start those guys because they are wide receiver ones on their teams. Got to step it up. Robbie Anderson, a lot of people saying, like, do I start him? He's had one good week, one bad week. This week, he's got a tough matchup. If you got a better option, you may want to sit Robbie Anderson. Be aware of that. Cooper Kupp coming off 2 phenomenal weeks. Finally got it in tough versus Arizona secondary. 9th hardest matchup versus position. Robinson came alive last week with a touchdown. Going to be interesting to see if Cooper Kupp can maintain this momentum and prove me wrong as a top wide receiver 2 years in a row. I don't see it. I see an injury happening. I do not see this guy maintaining this pace. It's absolutely insane. Nobody can be that good for that long. It's crazy, okay? And again, I still don't think Stafford's elbow is going to hold up this season. They've got in tough. This is another test. I told you, week 3 is going to be a telling tale for a lot of things, okay? It's going to separate the men from the boys. We're going to see who's the real deal. And 3 weeks in a row of Cooper Kupp makes it, man. I'll be pretty impressed at that return on investment for fantasy draft value, okay? Other guys that have it in tough, Godwin, Julio, all of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary, 10th hardest matchup versus position. And mid-range matchups include Rashad Bateman, definitely start worthy, Jahan Dotson, mid-range matchup. Drake London, who came alive last week, mid-range matchup. And Christian Kirk, who absolutely had a good week last week, mid-range matchup. So those are your wide receivers, all right? Moving on to tight end, there's been a lot of drama around tight ends because tight ends are just not performing after the first 3. Really, after you have like your Kelsey, your Andrews, it's like a major fall off. Waller, but again, he's got competition this year with Adams. It's been a disaster. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this section here other than to tell you, start your best tight end. Gerald Everett had a good week last week. Tyler Higbee's got a good matchup, right? Dawson Knox has been safe, right? Kelsey, obviously a start here. He's playing Indy, good matchup versus position. Kyle Pitts, crappy 2 weeks. Do you sit him? No. Because you drafted him in the 3rd round and he's got an easy matchup versus Seattle. That's a big question. Do you start him? Yes. Good matchup. Again, going back to that conversation, separate the men from the boys. This week, it's a make or break for these guys. So I got to do a separate video on make or break week for these guys going into this week. That's another video, okay? So Kyle Pitts, make or break week this week. Separate the men from the boys, all right? Mo Alley Cox and the tight ends from Indy, they've got a good matchup, but very, very hard to trust. Hawkinson, been mediocre at best. Relatively easy matchup. Definitely want to start him. Hayden Hurst has been safe and consistent. Definitely want to start him mid-range matchup, okay? Guys that have it in a little bit tough, Albert O had a 0-pointer last week. Again, very inconsistent here with the tight ends. O.J. Howard, Albert O, Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz has been relatively safe. Again, tough matchup, but you definitely want to start Zach Ertz. He's been consistent the past couple weeks, so you definitely want to consider starting him. But again, Albert O, O.J. Howard, all these guys, like, I'll give you another guy, David Njoku, very inconsistent, but they've got it in tough. Mike Gesicki came alive last week. Definitely worth starting, 14 points, but he's got a tough matchup. So again, we're scrimping, we're saving, we're hacking, we're slashing here at tight end. Look at the past couple weeks. Look at who you've got on the bench. Look who you got on your roster and start your best possible tight end here. It's literally a crapshoot with tight ends, okay? You're lucky to get 10 points. It's been a disaster this week. I was reading some posts saying that maybe we want to omit. I think Fantasy League should omit the tight end position. It shouldn't be there. You should maybe make a tight end wide receiver flex option, but you shouldn't be forced to start a tight end that's going to get you 0 points. It's been a disaster. I think it's more of a wide receiver league now. They're going more to wide receivers. I think the tight end position is dead. It's just a disaster of a position. Like I said, you've got those couple receiving tight ends, but after that, it's a huge fall off. Now you're saying, well, should I have drafted a tight end early? Not necessarily, because you're missing out on those workhorse running backs and you're missing out on those ace wide receivers. So I would still go running back robust. But again, tight ends, it's been an absolute disaster. All right. Okay. Last thing, defense, some optimal defenses to play this week. Let's rip through this. Panthers at the Saints, Cardinals versus the Rams, Jets versus Cincy, Chiefs versus Indy. But again, you never know. Indy could come back alive, right? Rams could light up the Cardinals. Could be a shootout. But on paper, Panthers, Cardinals, Jets, Chiefs, Raiders, Titans, Ravens, Bucks, Broncos. All decent matchups versus position. You also want to consider Giants at Dallas could have a good week. Now, that being said, Buffalo's been great. They've got a tougher matchup because they're playing the Dolphins, but you definitely don't want to sit Buffalo's defense. They've been great. Okay, so I would definitely, for year long, you want to start your starting defenses that have been efficient for you. All right, guys? If you have any questions, drop them below. I'm going to get to your questions, as many as I can. Drop them below. Head on over to prizepicks.com. Use code DFSLINE. Go create an account. Super fun to play. And of course, guys, make sure you guys smash the thumbs up and go treat yourself at manscaped.com. Use code SHOWERLINE20. Go treat yourself. All right, guys? Week 3 is upon us. It's a make or break for a lot of players. Start your best players. And join me on patreon.com/FFcounselor for direct access. Appreciate you guys. Week 3 is here. I'm out.